Hello, my little wordsmiths. So, do you love animals? You do, right? So, if you love animals, you're going to really enjoy today's lesson because today we are going to talk about my early days with the chimpanzees. Well, not my early days of Jane Goodall. So, first of all, let me introduce you to Jane Goodall. Now, Jane Goodall, she was an animal activist. She was a wildlife conservationist and she used to work with chimpanzees a lot. All her life, she has worked a lot with chimpanzees. You can see she was called as ape girls. Since a very young age, she used to work with chimpanzees and all sorts of ape in Tanzania. So this lesson or this story is an extract from her autobiography. Now, what is an autobiography? Once you want to write your life story for other people to read, you put it in a form of a book. This book is called an autobiography. Like it can be a diary, it can be journal, or it can be a complete book, which is called an autobiography. So Jane Goodall, she wrote her autobiography about her experiences working with chimpanzees and other apes in Tanzania. And this story is nothing but an passage, an extract from her autobiographical writing. So Jane Goodall spent more than 55 years observing wild chimpanzees in Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania. That means her entire life she gave to the rescue of animals like chimpanzees. July 16, 1960 was a day I shall remember all my life. Now, these are the words of Jane Goodall. So she's narrating the story, she's telling the story. She said that 16 July 1960 was a day that she will remember all her life. It was when I first set foot on the shingle and sand beach of Chimpanzee Land, that is Gombe National Park. Let us see how Gombe National Park looks. So, Gombe National Park. See, it's a beautiful place, and this is Jane Goodall with chimpanzee. See, this is Gombe National Park. So beautiful it is. Welcome to Gombe National Park. I was 26 years old. Mum and I were greeted by the two African game scouts who were responsible for protecting the 30 square miles of the park. They helped us find a place where we could put up our old ex-army tent. We chose a lovely spot under some trees near the small, fast-flowing Kakombe stream. Every morning I got up when I heard the alarm clock at 5:30 a.m. What is a.m.? A.m. is anti-meridian. That means in the morning. I ate a couple of slices of bread and had a cup of coffee from the flask. Then I set off climbing to where I thought the chimps might be. Most often I went to the peak. I discovered that from this high place I had a splendid view in all the directions. I could see chimps moving in the trees and I could hear it if they called. At first I watched from afar, through my binoculars, and never tried to get close. So earlier she used to watch them from far because for them also they were kind of new creatures and new experience. So she thought that they might harm her, or she simply wanted to observe them from the distance. I knew that if I did, the chimps would run away silently. Oh, so see, this was the reason. She didn't want to scare away the chimps. Gradually, I began to learn about the chimps' home and how they lived. I discovered that most of the time, the chimps wandered about in small groups of six or less, not in a big troop like baboons. Now, chimpanzees, they also live in families like other apes, but chimpanzees usually live in small families of six people or six chimps or less. Baboons, on the other hand, they live in huge troops. What are baboons? So, baboons are these monkeys. They usually move in very big tribes. So, like you can see here, there is a family of baboon that is sitting. So, this is how baboons live. Often a little group was made up of a mother with her children, or two or three adult males by themselves. Sometimes many groups joined together, especially when there was a delicious ripe fruit on one big tree. When the chimps got together like that, they were very excited, made a lot of noise, and were easy to find. Eventually, I realized that the chimps I watched from the peak were all part of one group, a community. They were all part of one community. Like how we all live together in a community, all us humans, we live in a community. So these chimps were also like living like that. There were about 50 chimps belonging to this community. From the peak, I noted which trees the chimps were feeding in, and then when they had gone, I scrambled down and collected some of the leaves, flowers, or fruits so they could be identified later. I found that the chimps eat mostly fruits, but also a good many kind of leaves, blossoms, seeds, and stems. Later, I would discover that they also eat a variety of insects and sometimes hunt and kill prey animals to feed on meat. During those months of gradual discovery, the chimps very slowly began to realize that I was not so frightening after all. So chimps also got used to Jane and they understood that okay, this human being is a nice human being. She's not going to harm us, and they became friendly with her. Even so, it was almost a year before I could approach them within 100 yards. And that is not really very close. 100 yards is also still quite far away. As the time went by, I began to learn more about the other creatures that shared the forest with the chimpanzees. There were four kinds of monkeys in addition to the baboons, and there were many smaller animals such as squirrels and mongooses. So, what is a mongoose? Mongoose is a rat-like creature. Let me show you. It's also a rodent. See, this is a mongoose. This is a mongoose. It looks a little bit like a rat, but it is a rodent. It has a huge tail and has a sleek body. Mongoose usually they are the enemies of the snakes and they fight and kill snakes to eat them. There was also a whole variety of nocturnal creatures like porcupines and civets. Let me show you porcupines and civets also. So this, as you know, is a porcupine. It has a rodent-like face and body, and it has spikes or quills in the back of its body. These quills are very sharp, and it can, whenever it is in danger, it can hunt with these quills. Civet is kind of a cat. It is a sleek, tiny cat, and this is what a civet looks like. African civet looks like. There was also a whole variety of nocturnal, of rats and mice. Sorry, there was also a whole variety of nocturnal creatures, porcupines and civets, and all manners of rats and mice. Only a very few animals in the forest as Gombe were potentially dangerous, mainly leopards and buffaloes. And of course, there are poisonous snakes of 7 different kinds. So you've got to be careful for those animals. Rest all animals were pretty harmless. Once, as I arrived on the peak in the early morning before it was properly light, I saw the dark shape of a large animal looming in front of me. I stood quiet. My heart began to beat fast, for I realized it was a buffalo. Many hunters fear buffalo more than lions or elephants. By a lucky chance, the wind was blowing from him to me, so he couldn't smell me. He was peacefully gazing in the opposite direction and chewing his cud. Cud is nothing but grass. He hadn't heard my approach. I always try to move as quietly as I can in the bush, so though I was only 10 yards from him, he had no idea I was there. Very slowly I retreated. Another time, as I was sitting on the peak, I heard a strange mewing sound. I looked around and there, about 15 yards away, a leopard was approaching. I could just see the black and white tip of its tail above the tall grass. It was walking along the little trail that led directly to where I sat. Leopards are usually not dangerous unless they have been wounded. Very silently, I moved away and looked for chimps in another valley. Later, I went back to the peak. The peak began to feel like home. I carried a little tin trunk up there. In it, I kept a kettle, some sugar and coffee, and a tin mug. Then, when I got tired from a long trek to another valley, I could make a drink in the middle of the day. I kept a blanket up there too, and when the chimps slept near the peak, I slept there so that I could be close by in the morning. I loved to be up there at night, especially when there was a moon. If I heard the coughing grunt of a leopard, I just prayed and pulled the blanket over my head. Chimps sleep all night just as we do. From the peak, I often watched how they made their nests or beds. First, the chimp bent a branch down over some solid foundation, such as a fork or two parallel branches. Holding it in place with his feet, he then bent another over it. Then he folded the end of the first branch back over the second, and so on. He often ended up picking up lots of small, soft, leafy twigs to make a pillow. So, chimpanzees, they not only made their beds, but they also used pillows made up of leaves and twigs. Chimps like their comfort. I've learned over the years that infants sleep in their nest with their mothers until they are about 5 years old. See, this infant is hugging and sleeping with her mother. Or until the next baby is born and the older child has to make its own bed. I never returned to camp before sunset, but even when I slept on the peak, I first went down to have supper with mum and tell her what I had seen that day. And she would tell me what she had been doing. Mum set up a clinic. Mum means Jane's mum. She handed out medicine to any of the locals, mostly fishermen, who were sick. Once she cured an old man who was very ill indeed. Word about this cure spread far and wide, and sometimes patients would walk for miles to get treatment. Now, Tanzania is a very poor country, and this park, it was located in a remote place where there was no doctor or anything. So, when a fisherman or when man got sick, Jane's mother helped him. So, the word spread, and everybody used to come to her for treatment. Her clinic was very good for me. It meant that local people realized we wanted to help. Mum had to go back to England after 4 months to manage things at home. Of course, I missed her after she had gone, but I didn't have time to be lonely. There was so much to do. And of course, she had her chimps also. So, this is the story of Jane Goodall. I hope you enjoyed listening to this story. Now, let's quickly learn some facts about chimps. Now, let's see whether the following statements are true or false. Now, these have already been answered by my daughter, and I guess she got them all right, but let's check them again. Chimpanzees are called the great apes along with orangutans and gorilla. True, because they are quite big compared to the other apes and monkeys. While chimpanzees live in Asia, Africa, and Australia. Now, this is false. Why? Because they live in Asia and Africa, but they do not live in Australia. Chimpanzees are strictly herbivorous animals. Now, this statement is false. We saw in Jane's story also that they sometimes hunt and eat little tiny animals also. Just like we human beings can use tools, chimpanzees can use tools as well. For example, they can crack a nut with rocks. This is true because chimpanzees, just like human beings, have opposable thumbs. See, they have thumbs just like us. Let me show you opposable thumb of a chimp. So see, just like us human beings, chimpanzees also have opposable thumbs. So they can grab onto things, they can hold things, and they can do all those things. So that's the reason they are called primates, just like our human beings. After human beings, chimpanzees are considered to be the most intelligent animals on this planet. Now, this fact is correct. Chimpanzees are very intelligent. In fact, some of them have learned to even operate computers. Some of them have even started to talk with humans using sign language. So, they are very intelligent. Chimpanzee population is steadily growing now. This statement is false because of hunting and some evil human beings. They are being endangered, and we've got to conserve them. We've got to preserve them. Baby chimpanzees cling to their mother's belly for first few months after their birth. This is true. Like we saw in this photo, the chimpanzees, they like to be near their mother and they like to hug her all the time. Then chimpanzees are called knuckle walkers. This is true because what is knuckle walkers? Knuckle is, let me show you a knuckle. See, this is a, let me show you chimpanzee knuckle. Chimpanzee knuckle. See, now they usually walk on the knuckles of their hand. Wait, let me chimpanzee knuckle walking. So as you know, these are the knuckles of our hands, and chimpanzees usually walk like this. They walk on the knuckle of their hand. So they are called knuckle walkers. You can see in these photos, they are knuckle walkers. See how this chimp is walking. A full-grown chimpanzee can be 5 to 6 times stronger than a human being. That's true, they are very strong. Chimpanzees can never walk upright. That's false because sometimes they can walk upright also. Like you can see in this photo, they can walk just like human beings. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. See you next time. Bye bye.